Great, thanks. It's good to be here. And when Melissa asked me to talk about this, I got really excited because I guess I looked back at the first time I became even aware of this was about 2000. And I was in a group of people who were very interested in peak oil. And I started going to those conferences and thought that was interesting. And then we talked about how food has so much involvement in sustainability. And then I was just going to say that the other day, actually 2 weeks ago, I went to the Healthy Food Local Farm Conference that's every year. It's been at KCD for the last 3 years. And a woman spoke, the woman who wrote this book called Foodopoly. I was very intrigued by what she had to say. Her name is Winona Potter, and she's one of the people in charge of Food and Water Watch. And so I was very interested in how the food system that I grew up knowing about and living in is so different today. And she did a very good job of explaining that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my story. I remember this to this day of being in the car, driving with my family to church and saying to my parents, you know, I don't know if that's such a good idea that they're putting homes on really good cropland. To me, it just didn't make any sense for that to be happening too. So I guess that was sort of in me from the get-go. And then in my late 20s, I remember seeing the phrase, live simply so others can simply live. And I just could not get my brain around that. I couldn't understand, because we live in such a consumer-oriented society, that how could me living simply help people who were poor? I just couldn't figure that one out. So I feel like I know a little bit more about that now. So what is sustainability? And that's really when the environment is viable, the natural environment is viable, the economy is sufficient for everybody, and there's sustainable development. And you know, I think that word sufficient is really important because you know, I guess I'm concerned about the big gap growing between the very wealthy and the very poor. Somehow or another, that's, to me, doesn't seem like a good thing. And then in the area of social, living in a nurturing community where we interact with one another, we know our neighbors, we can borrow things from our neighbors and things like that. So I'd like to look at how food is part of this. And I got some of the information from the Foodopoly book, really all of this information, and I'll do the best I can to talk about what's happening. So I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and actually I felt as though we had plenty to eat and, you know, lived pretty nicely. And now I understand why, because during the New Deal, which was in the middle to late 30s, Roosevelt and his colleagues passed many laws to protect farms and the farmers so that they would be able to stay on the land. There were price support, there were antitrust laws put into place, so that people were much more on like an even scale. But after World War II, many laws were passed, kind of like under the table from what I understand, to discourage farmers to stay farming. It is said that the industrialists, and those are the people that had the ears of the presidents and the ears of the people in the legislature, really didn't want farmers, thought that farmers were somebody that you really didn't have to have, and wanted them to be cheap laborers in the factories and stuff that were around. In that, the antitrust and consumer protection laws that were passed with the New Deal were dismantled by what I call those in the know. so that large companies could merge with other companies. You know, I remember, and I don't know how many in this room can remember when I think it was AT&T, they had to break it up because it was such a large conglomerate. And that was kind of at the time when I think all of this stuff started, where they were talking about monopolies and mergers and all of that. But when we look at the state of the food today, there are very few beef, pork, and chicken suppliers. And very few companies own several brands. And anybody who wants to look through the Foodopoly book, it has the pages of like Arthur Daniel Midland and all the different companies that they own, et cetera, et cetera. So profit is really the main thing that they're concerned about. In about the last 20 years or so, there have been many trade bills passed. We probably recognize the term NAFTA and WTO. They're working on one right now where they're trying to do the same thing with the Asian countries. And they were supposed to improve grain prices. Farmers were supposed to be able to grow more grain and get more for the grain, but in fact, they never did get more money for their grain. Most of that is cheaper nowadays. And I think it was in the 70s, the Agriculture Secretary said, get bigger, get out of farming. And many of the farmers, I don't remember, but I think there used to be 6 or 7 million farmers in the United States. And now they feel like there's just over 1 million. The books say 2 million, but a lot of people own land, but they get their money from other sources. So, so anyway, when you think about it, like corn and wheat and rice are grown in places, in countries, and those people don't eat them. They're transported to other countries, ours in particular, very cheaply, and they're used by the countries here to make to make cheaper products for us to eat. So now we're to the point where Americans spend about 90% of their food budgets on processed foods. We eat about half of our meals and snacks away from home, and recently Yale did a study and found that 84% of homes with children had fast food in the previous week. So it's pretty scary when you think about how the dinner table with the family around it is no longer that. And for those of us that are in nutrition, we certainly see the effects of that. So I think the main thing is that what I remember was agriculture, and it's still called agriculture because it's the growing in a cultural context, and now really it's agribusiness. In 2004, there was an article in Harper's Magazine that affected me quite a bit. It was written by Richard Manning, and he pointed out these facts that aside from hydrocarbons or oil, rice, wheat, and corn are the most concentrated form of sun energy to be found on this planet. So we definitely get a lot of calories from that. However, what agribusiness has done is taken those calories and then used fossil fuel calories in order to make the food that we're eating today. In other words, the packaging and the moving it from 1,500 miles away, et cetera, et cetera. So in 1940, for every 2.5 calories of food energy that we used 1 calorie of fossil fuel energy. But by 1974, which is the last time this study was done, the ratio was 1 to 1. In other words, we're really not getting ahead of the game in terms of fuel. I thought this quote was good. By mining the iron for tractors, drilling new oil to fuel them, making nitrogen fertilizers, taking the water that rains and the rivers meant for other lands, farming extended its boundaries, its dominions to lands that aren't farmable. At the same time, it extends its boundaries across time, tapping fossil fuel energy that we could use in the future. So, in essence, what we eat takes a lot of energy to produce, especially that which we get in grocery stores. Now this really blew me away. Making cereal, when you think about grinding it, milling it, wetting it, drying it, and baking breakfast cereals requires 4 calories of energy for every calorie of food energy it produces. So if you think about a package of cereal, you can put about a half a gallon of gas next to it, and that's how much it takes. Altogether, the food processing energy in the United States uses about 10 calories of fossil fuel for every calorie of food energy it produces, so this is not sustainable. So what do? Well, Wendell Berry has said, and I think probably most of you in this room have heard it, is that we vote with our fork. In other words, what we eat does make a difference because it comes from various and sundry places. When we go out to eat, if we ask for locally produced food, we're voting with the money that we buy at those particular places. So by coming to the farmers markets, belonging to food co-ops, we are doing a better job of keeping and using the kind of resources that are sustainable. I really feel like this is an untapped area and that we need to encourage people to grow more of their own food. Now we certainly, most people that live in the city can't grow everything that they eat, but they can grow some of the things that they eat. And during World War II, the Victory Gardens actually produced about 70% of the food in the United States, which is a lot when you stop to think about it. We need, all of us, to get involved in food politics before it's too late. When the farmers that live around Louisville and around other metropolitan areas are lucky is because they can, and we are too, they can bring the food to us. But 2/3 of the farms are not close to metro areas, and so farmers markets are really out of the question. So we need to clean up this sustainability mess if we want healthy food and water for the future. Not many farmers are left right now, and the other thing that's concerning is the land that they used to own because they can't make it is being sold to people in other countries or large agribusinesses, which is concerning. The woman who wrote the book, Foodopoly, is part of the Food and Water Watch organization. They have a website that you can go to find out the kinds of things that they're looking at, and it keeps up to date on bills and policy making. I haven't gotten to the part of the book yet where they're talking about the latest trade bill, but she was very emphatic that many of us should be getting behind that, writing our senators and representatives to not have that happen because it cheapens food even more. Read an article, I think it's in the American Dietetic Association journal, that the heading was Bring Home Ec Back to Schools. That has not been in schools in a long time. Unfortunately, the last years that it was popular, the teachers really didn't teach the kids to cook from scratch, and so it was just basically warming up the stuff that you get in grocery stores, which is really not what we want to happen. But that information is out there, and it would be really good to present it to others and learn to cook from scratch for ourselves. I say that cooking is a dying art. A lot of people don't have much courage about cooking, and I think it would be really good if we took a deep breath and tried to figure out how to make some of the things that our parents used to. Some quotes for us to remember. These are the things that I remember and say to myself when I get down and discouraged, or when I think I'm kind of falling away from doing it. First one is sustainability is living on nature's income rather than its capital. That's a good one, I think. Wendell Berry said, whether we and our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all our deals and decisions, and she has more votes, a longer memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we do. I hear this a lot. Oh, organic food or local food or whatever term you want to put on it is so expensive. And the question was, start asking why conventional food is so cheap. We don't really ask about that. Conventional egg carries hidden costs that catch up with us later on. Poor health, climate change are far more expensive in the end than the extra buck you pay for a sustainably farmed tomato. To help oneself stay on track, and I think this is one area, because living sustainably is not the main street. I'll speak for myself, need a support group of people that I know are doing some of the same stuff. So join a group that encourages sustainability, because it's not Main Street yet. Another good group that's easy to join and not expensive. There's lots of people who are part of it, so there's money to get involved in the political work, and that's the Sierra Club. I think is a really good organization. Churches, work, and schools are good places to find people who are interested in sustainability. So sometimes we just need to ask the questions ourselves. Would you like to meet once a month? And I've been involved with it's actually a simplicity group for, I think, over 10 years. I can't believe the time has gone by that quickly. But we get together once a month on a particular day of the month. Everybody signs up to bring a food. Our main dish is generally vegetarian. Now, it wouldn't have to be, because not everyone in the group is vegetarian, but there are a few that are, so and one person can't eat nuts, so we can't have that either. But anyway, it's really wonderful to have this great home-cooked food, and then we talk about various topics in the sustainability area. UofL has a really great sustainability movement. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you go to their website, you can actually get involved with sustainability issues with the university. I think organizing cooking groups would be wonderful. Wouldn't have to be something like a simplicity group, but even if you had a monthly cooking group where maybe everybody had to bring something that they made themselves rather than pick it up at the store before they went. You learn from one another how to make things and get some ideas. So that's enough of my podium speaking.